Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Parkinson's Podcast. Welcome to the Hear, Hear Parkinson's Podcast, where you will hear from special guests covering the world of Parkinson's with a deep dive on the World Parkinson Congress and a look at how the WPC has helped make extraordinary progress in the Parkinson's community by creating space for people with Parkinson's to have a seat at the table.
All right, Hear, Parkinson's. This is the World Parkinson Coalition's podcast, Hear, Parkinson's. And I am Eli Pollard, the Executive Director at the World Parkinson Coalition. I am hosting the show today without a sidekick. I do not have a co-host. I'm just here chatting with our special guest, Richelle Flanagan. I'm so excited about this conversation with you, Richelle. And I know we just had a few minutes to talk before we're kicking this off. And I'll just tell the listeners that Richelle and I first met in the sort of lobby foyer area at the Kyoto Congress in 2019, the WPC 2019. Richelle was one of the participants. And I just feel like I've watched you show up in the Parkinson space and just launch. Like you just are so amazing with everything that you've been doing in the space. And I want to hear about it and I want our listeners to hear about it. So Richelle Flanagan, tell us a little bit about yourself and then let's talk about your WPC experience and where you've been since you first started coming to the congresses.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant, brilliant to be here. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat, but yeah, I mean, I suppose Kyoto was the first Congress, which blew me away. And then I was in Barcelona, so I'm really looking forward to Phoenix, Arizona. So booked my accommodation, trying to get there. And one of the best things about it was meeting people with Parkinson's, young onset Parkinson's, and we're all already talking about how excited we are to see each other again since Barcelona. So yeah, really looking forward to it. But yeah, I suppose I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. I basically, I'm a registered dietitian. I have over 20 years experience now. And I basically was working in my dietetic clinic when I first picked up my Parkinson's symptom of my handwriting being a problem. So basically a patient had come in to see me after a 5-year gap. And when I was writing in my record card, I noticed that my handwriting was a lot smaller than it had been 5 years prior. And I thought it's a bit strange. And when I tried to make it bigger, I couldn't. I thought that's really strange. And so I started to look like many people do with their symptoms of Parkinson's, because so many of them are, just like constipation, depression, anxiety, frozen shoulder. They're kind of things that are common across other, conditions. So I started Googling to see, what's going on here. And a thing called micrographia kept on coming up, which is small handwriting. And the one thing that it came up with was Parkinson's all the time. And no matter how much I tried to find something else, nothing else was associated with it.
Ugh.
So I thought, oh, okay. I thought this is a bit scary. And then I was actually at a Bruce Springsteen concert, and everyone's waving their hands in the air.
As one does.
Yeah, as one done when you're 3 months pregnant. And I started waving my hands in the air, and I noticed I couldn't move my right hand, as well as my left.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. And then also I was eating spaghetti, and I couldn't twirl the fork as easily, when you do it on the spoon, twirling the fork. And I thought, okay, why can't I move? And I had this problem with my shoulder where it was just kind of stiff, and I was getting physio for the bicep muscle was very sort of tight and sore, and holding a bag on my shoulder was, would just kind of wear me out. Just go to physio, and to be honest, just all the pieces kind of dropped. And I thought, maybe I need to go and see a neurologist. So that was my beginning of my journey with Parkinson's. So I went to see the neurologist, and he said, you're very fit, healthy, you're pregnant. So I was probably put through what a lot of young onset people are put through. I was put through a trapped nerve test, I was put through a brain scan to check, for those, but like, because I was pregnant, I couldn't have a DAT scan, which is kind of something they use as a confirmatory if they're unsure, because obviously they don't want to give a young onset or young person a diagnosis of Parkinson's if they don't have to.
Yeah.
But the problem was because I was pregnant, I couldn't have the DAT scan until I say she was born, and I had finished breastfeeding 7 months later. So that was quite a long time to have to wait for something that I kind of suspected was going to be Parkinson's. So when I went into them then to show the DAT scan, you could see the dopamine area being affected, and yeah, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's. So it was a bittersweet delivery of my beautiful daughter with a diagnosis of Parkinson's. And yeah, that was a very quiet holiday. We literally went on holiday a couple of days later, and it just took the rug from under us. But I suppose as a dietitian, I'd done a lot of work advocating for other people with other, conditions around access to dietetic care. And, I would always advise patients to always make sure they link in with the Parkinson or the chronic disease condition, what organization is associated, so they diabetes, to speak to Diabetes Ireland or whatever. So I sort of took my own advice and decided to look and see what was out there in terms of support. And also, I was also the president of my professional body. I was also the first CEO of the Irish Nutrition and Dietetic Institute in Ireland. And I'd done a lot of advocating about access to nutritional care for people with different chronic diseases. So, so when I started, I suppose in terms of as a dietitian, I would always be saying to people to take control of the situation, no matter what, they were sort of diagnosed with. So I had to kind of give myself that advice. So I started looking for, information on diet with Parkinson's. And it was actually someone I met through the Young Onset Parkinson's group in Parkinson's Ireland, was Gary Boyle, who'd attended one of the WPCs, and he was due to go, but I think actually had a car accident or something, and he couldn't afford to go, or there was some reason, and he said, you should go. And our Parkinson's Ireland basically put a kind of grant forward to help, pay the way to get there. So that really was what helped me get to between Gary and the grant to get to the World Parkinson's Congress. And that was on the basis that I would come back then and share with the group. And actually from that presentation back, we had a big gang of us went to WPC Barcelona.
Amazing.
So it was really and again, there's going to be more people going to Arizona. So yeah, that was kind of how I ended up at Kyoto. And I remember very well where I met you. It was in the lounge area of the the WPC. They have like, the sessions where physios and OTs and etc. So I arrived up. I was like, where's the dietitian one? And there wasn't one. I was like, what? And I remember talking to, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He's very handsome, gray, silver hair. He was organizing that session, and he said, oh, I must introduce you to Eli, and you can talk to her about it. So I doorstepped you and said, this has got to change.
And
so
it
that's what I remember.
I think that you single-handedly pushed not just the WPC, but like the whole Parkinson's community to make sure that nutrition and dietary, considerations are part of the conversation. Really, truly, I think you've really done that. That is your flag to carry. And I think it's amazing because that is often one of the questions I hear people talk about, like, what foods should I eat?
Yeah.
And I love that you've taken this up and you're talking about it and sharing with people. And also I always love you shared something with me a while ago about how we always talk about Mediterranean diet is good, not just for people with Parkinson's, but for everybody, that you always say this. And like you pointed out to me, yes, some people live in parts of the world where you can't get a Mediterranean diet, nor would you eat that if that was given to you, because it's not your culture, not culturally appropriate. So like you said, in every culture, there is like a Mediterranean diet that could be created. And I just love that thinking because it's true. It sometimes people will take an out on things like I can't do that, or it doesn't work for me, or it doesn't. But like you said earlier, you used the word I think choice, there's choices about stuff. And that's one of the things I love about the work I do is we always tell people like half of your wellness is focused on, your medication plan and your doctor and your care plan with the health professional team, but the other half depends so much on the choices you make about the food you eat and exercise. And you're always exercising, Richelle. I know you're an athlete, but you're always also out talking to people on your walks through the beautiful woods of wherever you are outside of Dublin. And so it's like the nutrition and social connectedness, exercise, and these choices. And I see you modeling, like you're walking the walk. And I think it just gives people that inspiration as well. But the nutrition is exciting. So you started your conversation. I remember you walking around asking people about nutrition. And just so the listeners know, we do now ask if someone is a registered dietitian slash nutritionist when you register. And when we do our healthcare clinical breakout networking in the evening, that is one of the categories. So if you are a nutritionist or registered dietitian, there is a space for you to connect with others in the
Yeah.
Parkinson's space. But
That
what,
was like a really like, that was for me a momentous moment because I sort of set the goal at Kyoto. I was like, okay, the next time I come here, there's going to be a breakout for dietitians. And it was brilliant that there was like, and there was a number of us. And it was just, I think it was a really important, I think that's a WPC, it gives a platform for change, and I think because it brings people with Parkinson's and their loved ones and health professionals and researchers and clinicians together, amazing things can happen, and change happens. And like, it's not to say like I was really down when I was diagnosed, and I hid it for 2 years. Like I didn't actually share it until it was the WPC that actually triggered me to come out of the closet, shall we say, because I didn't have a tremor. So I was able to, hide my symptoms. But when you're hiding something, that puts a big mental stress on you. And I kind of thought, like I was also on the Celiac Society of Ireland uh, board and also on their advisory clinical advisory. And, I had no problem advocating about that. I know I have a problem advocating about other conditions. And I was like, why am I scared of? And it was because I was fearful of people's judgment of me, of not being as capable, because I had Parkinson's, because it's a brain condition, and the image is, it's improving, but the image is very much an older person's, and um, there is a sort of stigma that it's a cognitive issue, and actually the research now is showing that maybe that's not in terms of dementia, and may not be so much on the horizon as first thought. Um, so there was a lot of fear around that people would think of me too, and also from a work point of view. And I love my work, that your clients would think that I wasn't going to be as capable, and um, so like I hit it. But when I went to the WPC, I suddenly realized like I'm not going to change things if I don't actually acknowledge this and make it part of my life, because it's harder to carry the burden on your own. So I kind of came on. I saw so many, wonderful advocates who are now, happy to call friends. And I thought, that's what I do in other things. I need to, start doing that with Parkinson's. And it was actually when I was back in Ireland, and then we have a kind of a dietitian group of private practitioners that we, share things with each other and ask, if someone's got someone that they, it's not their clinical area, they'll say, do you see this person? And one of them put in the WhatsApp, do any of you see young onset people with Parkinson's? And they all, several of them came back saying, no, I only see them when they're later stage, more advanced. And I thought, okay,
this is it.
I'm going to have to say something here. So that was where I jumped off the precipice and said, actually, I have young onset, and it's really important that you engage early in the process as well as late. And actually from that, I really got support from the group, and I actually did training of them so to bring them up to speed with Parkinson's and all the aspects of it. And that was probably my first step out into advocating around nutrition specifically. And then I wrote an article for my professional body magazine. We have a sort of journal magazine. And I wrote an article about the missing sort of importance of diet in Parkinson's. And that started to kind of create. And I met Fiona Lithander, who now is a good friend and is actually speaking at the next WPC in Arizona. Because when I went in Kyoto, there was a limited number of talks, and I think there's going to be, and in terms of research, there's a couple of posters, but I think we're going to have an awful lot more in Arizona. So, and I know from my network of, because I came to being a dietitian late when I was in my 30s, and it blew me away the knowledge and the intelligence and the capacity of the dietitians. Like, they are a very clever bunch of people, and they're amazing researchers. And I think within the Parkinson's world, we have been missing out. It's not just about what food we can eat, but actually it's understanding the mechanism under behind the foods, and actually are the things we can do to help slow progression by knowing those metabolites and how it impacts Parkinson's progression and symptoms. I think there's so much, and there's so many clever brains in that nutrition field, research field,
Yeah.
that really could benefit the Parkinson's sphere. So I'm really excited that, we're seeing, it's sort of spread out in terms of bringing that research into the WPC, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really buzzed by it, as you can tell.
I love it. I mean, and first of all, the story of you mentioning and talking about your YOPD, your WhatsApp group, first of all, that must have just been like an earthquake for the group because they didn't know you had Parkinson's, and that's how you shared it with them. Wow, that's incredible. I kind of got chills when you told me that because I'm sure they were like, I don't know anybody with YOPD. And you're like, well, actually, you know me. I didn't realize that you hid it for 2 years, which doesn't surprise me at all, I had never heard you share that before.
Yeah.
I just want to circle back a little bit because
Mhm.
you shared that you were pregnant. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a wild time, Richelle. First of all, being pregnant,
Yeah.
having a child is
Yeah.
absolutely life-changing. And then you
Yeah.
have diagnosis of Parkinson's too, incredibly life-changing shift
Mm.
happen at the same time. And
Yeah.
you probably had the symptoms before the pregnancy, but you just didn't
Yeah.
get diagnosed until afterwards. So
Yeah.
your daughter has literally grown up with you. You have two kids,
Mhm.
your 9-year-old
Mhm.
and then one heading off to university.
Yeah.
Um, what's that been like just as a parent? And does she know, like obviously she's 9 now, so
Yeah.
she's only known you with your Parkinson's. So how do you guys
Yeah.
navigate that in the house? I'm just curious.
Well, I suppose, I don't like specifically sit down and talk about it. It's
Right.
just they know I'm doing this, and I'm always off here, there, and everywhere, doing talks. And I mean, when I got nominated for the award, the WPC award, they did a little video for it, so they were aware of what I'm doing. I don't know if my daughter has a concept of, what it means. So I think in terms of, I always say with kids, they'll ask the questions when they need
Of
the
course.
answer.
Excellent. Actually,
So,
absolutely.
I kind of always gone on that basis, a need to know basis, in terms of, there's no point in putting something on their shoulders that they're not ready to take, I suppose, is kind of
Right.
the approach I've taken. Um, and I think, if things change, that'll bring up a different conversation,
Yeah.
and my son is, I think they're just used to me, just who I am. I'm still doing what I do. Um, it's harder. I mean, I definitely, um, find my energy is not as good as, 9 years ago, but then I'm also 9 years older. So that's, to be expected. And when you're a busy mom, like, and, trying to run a company and stuff, it's busy, but, yeah, no, I think we just, yeah, business as usual, really.
Get
And,
on and keep going. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, sometimes I have to, in terms of my energy levels, I have to just disappear and go to bed, like, and just, um, but, my husband's just going to have to take over, or, I just have to retreat. So it's not to say that it's easy, but you just have to, yeah, choose to retreat when you need to, I
yeah.
suppose. Yeah.
Making again choices. It's the choices that you're
Yeah.
making. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard your pregnancy story before. I'm sure you've told it before. I just hadn't heard it. I've heard you give a lot of different talks, so sometimes I pick up one thing here and something there. But
Yeah.
one other thing that, you really, I mean, aside from nutrition and being a registered dietitian and that being a huge focus of yours,
Mhm.
one of the things I really remember about you from Kyoto is that you had a mission. You were walking up to every researcher you could find, I think mostly women, but also the male researchers, and you were asking
Yeah.
about the medication efficacy and why during your menstruation cycle or menses that the efficacy didn't seem to be the same, and why the uptake didn't seem the same. And I remember, I don't remember who you were talking to, but I think they said something like, "Wow, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen any research on that before. Maybe you should do it. Like it should be done," sort of thing. And it was like you just took that and you just ran with it. And it's amazing because if you look at the whole world of Parkinson's, you know, around 10% of people live with young onset Parkinson's. So they would be the target group that would still be menstruating. And then of that 10%, only like half of them are women. So then you run down to like 5% of the population. And then of the 5%, some of them like they're not getting pregnant or whatever it is. You were like a tiny minority in this group, but you identified a very serious gap in medical research. And we know research for many, many decades and decades, always focused typically on men and tested men, and women weren't even part of necessarily the research groups, and these sorts of questions weren't asked. So, like, my gosh, you've done so much. I mean, the Women's Parkinson's Project, the app, the research with. I mean, just tell us a little bit about that because I think it's amazing. And again, I just had this vision in Kyoto, and then I think to like I look at your websites now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been what is it, 6 years, 6 years, and you've done all of this. Like, it's incredible. So if you ever have a day where you're like, oh, I just can't do it, just look at the 6 years because you've literally changed the conversation in nutrition and gender and in 6 years. So tell us a little bit about that work.
Yeah. I think, that was like obviously nutrition I'm really passionate about because it's what I work in, and I really but I suppose it was a personal experience in terms of the hormones, because I noticed myself that, that my hormones, my menstrual cycle, basically the week before my menstrual bleed, that my symptoms were worse. And it was only in conversations probably in Kyoto that we were kind of identifying between us that it wasn't just me, it was other women that were experiencing this. And then it was subsequent to WPC when we set up a Marco Polo group. So it's this app that allows you to kind of do video calls with each other. And it was brilliant for my friends that I met, Kat Hill and Sripathy, as a way of communicating when there were, different time zones. And obviously then COVID sort of hit, and that sort of really helped us to keep in contact. But it was through that we were sort of noticing more and more of these things with regard to women's needs not been met, so this was not something that was being looked at. And I suppose with my science background, I kind of started looking at the research and going, well, what's going on here? Why are the symptoms? And, realizing then that estrogen drops before your menstrual bleed, and that affects your dopamine, and that this is possibly what was causing the problem. So then I suppose I kind of said, we need to do a survey on this. We need to sort of find out if other women are, and I remember someone kind of saying, oh, I don't know if you should really do that. And I was like, I'm going to do it.
I love it. I love it. Someone questioning the validity of the idea, and you saying, no.
Yeah.
Now there's even more of a reason because you're questioning it. Now I'm really going to do it.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, my daughter would say, you're not the boss of me. So I was like, red flag to a bull, I'm going to do this. So we obviously, myself and Shri and Kat, set up the Women's Parkinson's Project. And that sort of stemmed out of a relationship I had with a lady called Maria Teresa Ferretti, who was the Chief Technical Officer of the Women's Brain Project, which is now the Women's Brain Foundation. And, she had engaged me to sort of talk I'd actually reached out to her. They were doing a whole session. It was all about Alzheimer's. And I reached out and said, what about Parkinson's? What about women and Parkinson's? And she invited me to speak at their conference. So I basically, said to the girls, we set up the WPP, and I said, look, I think we should do the survey. So put together a survey, is sent, I think it was about 290 women worldwide, completed it. And it showed that 86% of women reported the same phenomenon. So that's not just a chance thing. Like, that's a pretty, and 49% notice a worsening during the week during their menstrual bleed. So, which makes sense because estrogen starts to come back. So some people start to resolve. And then there's only about 9% who still had problems after their period. So like this was really stark. But in the survey, we also asked, the women, do the neurologists talk to you about your hormones about your Parkinson's and hormones? And do they discuss HRT? Do they discuss, menstrual cycle impact? Do they discuss menopause? Because we also asked questions in the survey about, because I noticed, because I was then moving into perimenopause, that my symptoms were all over the shop, like be fine one minute and then all over. And again, that's because the hormones are fluctuating as you go into the menopause. So, and in the survey, it showed that about 40% of women reported worsening of their symptoms across their transition. And interesting research shows now that women who have more residual estrogen as they go through the menopause have a slower progressing Parkinson's and a less aggressive Parkinson's than women who don't have as much estrogen.
Wait, say that again, Richelle. Say that line again.
Yeah. So women who have more residual estrogen as they go through the menopause and out the other side have a less aggressive Parkinson's and a slower and better symptom control, slower progression, and less aggressive than those who have less estrogen, which kind of ties in with the estrogen definitely having an impact. And it's interesting as well in terms of estrogen. So, in the society we're in, women are all about losing weight, but actually, when your body loses estrogen, it doesn't lose it completely. It loses from your ovaries, but you have estrogen receptors all over your body, and particularly in fat cells. And that's where it produces estrogen, because the body knows, it's very clever, that women need estrogen. But actually, if you do a lot of dieting to lose that, is that going to impact the amount of estrogen that you have? And these are questions that we haven't answered. So I actually met, and again, the benefit of WPC is relationships. I met Marie from France Parkinson.
Marie Fusati, one of our former science ambassadors.
Yeah, and she's just amazing. And she really saw, the importance of women and nutrition. So she asked me to actually speak about nutrition, women hormones, but she asked me to speak at a conference last year that they had. And I met a researcher there from France, and he was looking at the prevalence of Parkinson's in a huge cohort of women. And it actually showed that women who had a higher BMI had a lower risk of Parkinson's. And I was thinking to myself, why would that be? Now, this is only my theory, but, so unlike cancer, where actually having too much estrogen is a negative thing, potentially having more estrogen in having more weight because you have more of it in your fat cells, perhaps is a protective mechanism in Parkinson's.
That's wild.
I don't know. That's a theory, but why is that? So I think there's a lot that we need to find out. So basically, in terms of that survey, did it, and we were blown away by the results. I actually did a webinar with Maria Teresa Ferretti, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is So in answer to the women, asking them how many of them were asked by the neurologist about their hormones, etc., 90% said they weren't. So only 10% of women had that discussion with their neurologist.
Surprised it was even 10%. I thought it was going to be like 0.
Yeah. To be fair, I've got to give some of them some kudos. So it was actually Maria Teresa Ferretti who said that was the standout thing for her, was that there was no conversation about it. There's nothing been done. So from that, I kind of said, okay, maybe I'll reach out. And I formed a relationship again from WPC with Helen Matthews, the Cure Parkinson's Trust, and then with Indu Subramanian as well, and who was doing sort of hosting things over lockdown, the PMD Alliance. So I reached out to both of them and said, look, thinking of maybe could we do a webinar to sort of discuss these, results, and, maybe put a panel together. And so between those two webinars, we had 600 women attend. We obviously did one with WPC. We hosted one, myself and Sri, about women as well. And it really opened up this Pandora's box of, it wasn't just about the menstrual cycle. It wasn't just about menopause, but it was about fear of dementia, women living alone, and fear of, how they were going to look after themselves. It was about bone health. There were so many unmet needs, pelvic floor issues, urinary issues, and I think women sort of tend to just put up and shut up. There's, I think, some research to say that when a woman gets dismissed a couple of times by their health provider, stop going back. Um,
Yeah.
so it sort of allowed this platform for women to actually just, share what was going on. And then it was when we realized again from, the panels, so the speakers, like it was Indu, there was Professor Elena Morrow, myself, there was Sonia Mather and um, Anne-Leanne Oosterman from Holland. And I kind of said, I wonder should we write some kind of summary of this up or a paper or whatever? And it sort of got legs. And we wrote then a paper on the unmet needs of women with Parkinson's.
Incredible.
And that literally just, exploded in terms of, discussion around it. And we got a lot of pushback, to be honest. There was a bit of sort of like, there's that annoying redhead, talking about hormones again. But I'm glad to say that I'm absolutely blown away that the Nature Journal for Parkinson's has just announced that they're going to have an issue specifically on sex and gender in Parkinson's.
Amazing. I didn't hear that. That's
Yeah.
great.
And actually, your WPC scientific ambassador, Roberta Marungi, is the editor on this issue.
Brilliant. I love
So,
that.
like, that's just like phenomenal, and, so for me, it's just wonderful to now see all the work that, not just me, but, other, as the women I've mentioned, both researchers, and I think that's the power of WBC, is with it, we don't see each other as neurologist and patient. It's a collaborative,
Yeah.
and they appreciate our input. That's really powerful. And I think that's where the change has come from. I mean, at the end of the day, if Indu hadn't, or if Helen Matthews hadn't welcomed me in terms of, and rather than looking down their nose at me and going, what would you know? They actually said, okay, yeah, that there's something here, like, and gave us the platform. And that's what WPC also gives people the platform to actually, have an idea. And it's
Yeah.
like, you're going to find someone there who's going to go, oh, I'll do research with you on that.
Exactly.
So, you know,
It's amazing, actually. I think in Edgar, or my normal co-host who's not with us today, he calls it the unconference. The part of the WPC conference that's outside of the educational rooms, but where you
yeah,
make those connections. And I think that one of the things that it took me a while to figure out why. I think the WPC did it well. I mean, of course, I've always known we've done it well, but I didn't understand why it was different until Edgar said to me one day, the WPC, when someone comes in to speak, one of these rock star presenters and a famous person, wherever they come in to speak, at other meetings, they walk into the room, they plug their thumb drive in, they give their talk, and then they leave. He's like, but at the WPC, they don't leave. They hang
yeah,
out. They go to the
yeah,
hotel, they go to the pub, they hang out at the pool. And you're
yeah,
like, you're meeting them. So it allows for this conversation to come about sort of
yeah,
naturally. It doesn't feel forced. And it
yeah,
took a while to figure out that's how all these incredible connections were happening. But
yeah,
you're a perfect
yeah,
example of that. Amazing.
yeah, yeah. And I remember going up to Bass Bloom, and looking up at him and, doorstepping about nutrition, whatever. And he's like, oh, nutrition's the next big thing coming. And, it's taken a while, but I think we're beginning to see, focus on that. And then the last WBC, like I'm a big Malu Tanzi, fan in terms of all her work around the gut brain and inflammation. And, we were in the same hotel having, cocktails together and talking about and doing dopamine dunks, together and conversations spark and ideas spark from those as well, so
Absolutely.
and she invited me then to speak at I can't remember what it's called, but it's specifically a conference for um postdocs and that are doing research, and it's preclinical research.
Gordon, the
um
Gordon
the
conference.
Gordon Cons, yeah, so she invited me to that to speak in Switzerland, I think it's Switzerland, um, and share about what I was doing around my Ms. Matter and the app and the research, um, and it was amazing to see, you know, people like the penny dropping and like them sort of saying, I hadn't thought about that. And I remember one girl coming up to me and saying, she said, I saw a signal, but I just thought it was, I didn't really think it was anything to sort of look at. But she said, I'm going to go back now and actually look and see, is there like something going on there? And um,
Cool.
so yeah, that's the connection. So that's that ripple effect then to be able to impact. I was asked to speak at a Roche digital biomarker conference and about the My Moves Matter app and about the research that we were doing. tracking women's symptoms across their hormonal cycles. And when I spoke about what I was going to talk about, and I said, look, I think I should focus on the difference between sex and gender and digital biomarkers. And he was like, no, I don't really think there's much like, and I was like, okay, red rag to bull again. So it's like, okay, I'm going to talk about it. And I remember at the end of the conference, a couple of people asked questions. I thought, oh God, did that fall flat? And then afterwards, the amount of people that came up to me and said, I'm embarrassed. I actually never thought of this before. And this is a room full of like seriously brainy researchers.
Yes.
And they were like, we never looked, like there's one guy came up, he said, we'd 15,000, people on our research. We never actually thought of looking at the difference between men and women, but we're going to do that now. And one man came up and said, you've changed the atmosphere in the room here, and a couple of women came up after us and they said, like, we're always kind of afraid to bring this up in terms of, sex differences. And one woman came up to me in the hotel and she said, I wanted to give you a standing ovation, but she said, I kind of felt I couldn't. And I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I think it just showed how, and that all stemmed from that very first survey that came out of WPC.
Yes.
Has stemmed all of that. That's where it started. And now we've got like the GEM-PT study coming out of Diane Stevenson's I can't remember the name.
Critical
path.
Yep.
And she saw me speak at Roche, and they had funding, philanthropic funding, and they were wondering at what to put it in. And she said, right, women is going to be one of the things they're going to put on the table. And thankfully, it was chosen. And like, that's for me an outcome, because we need those big organizations to do. And what they're going to do now is start to look at data that's already been collected and analyze it. And I can't believe, so we know that women, for example, have more fluctuations and have more off times and have more dyskinesia than men. But
why? Yeah, this is amazing. Richelle, we could literally talk for 5 more hours. I love everything. And I'm always super supportive of your work. And all these people you mentioned, you're getting like Malu Tanzi and Diane Stevenson and Maria Fusati, you're going to see them all in Phoenix. So as we sort of wrap up our podcast, I want to hear from you just the thing you're sort of most excited about with Phoenix. Like, what are you really looking forward to in 9 months? What is it you're most excited about?
I'm really excited about seeing my friends, because I haven't seen them. So it's nothing like actually seeing them in the flesh. Because actually I hadn't met any of them because there was lockdown and stuff. We couldn't. So we met physically for the first time in Barcelona. So that was really powerful. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm really looking forward to be honest, from a nutrition perspective, seeing the research work that I've been working on, and Fiona Lithander and other people have been working on, and hoping that I will be able to put in abstracts, about nutrition and also the women's stuff. So I'm really excited to see where we've moved in those two spheres and to see progress, I suppose, is kind of,
And the progress takes time. I mean, and we talked about this before the podcast. I mean, you started in 2019 at that first WPC where these sparks went off. Yeah. Now it's going to be WPC 2026. So that's 7 years, but it takes 7 years to get the ideas out, to flesh it out, to survey the people, to analyze the data, to present, to get feedback. I mean, it takes time, and you've been doing two things. So I'm excited to see your abstracts. I'm assuming we'll get one on nutrition, one on gender, and maybe more than that. I'm excited, and hopefully then maybe there are poster tours, maybe there are hot topics, and we can get it even more eyeballs.
And I looked at the agenda, and what's really exciting is I've seen loads of new names, like and I think that's really exciting in terms of seeing new stuff. Because when I was diagnosed, I went to the first one, was like, we were told, cure is going to be here in the next 10 years. Now I've let that go. I think cure is probably difficult because there's so many different strands of types of Parkinson's, like there are cancers. But I think what we're getting closer to is slowing progression. And I do think, actually, I do feel quite hopeful that is something we're just on the cusp of. So I think I'm really excited for that, to see what new, because I think when you bring new people together, that's, rather than group think, it's good to sort of spread it out.
That is definitely something we try to do. We try to not bring the same speakers back, even the famous ones, because we want to cultivate and support the future, leaders and make sure everyone gets a chance.
Yeah.
I know we don't have much time left, but I want to ask you one more question. This is our
Yeah.
fun exit question. Edgar loves to ask this one. He's not here, so I'm going to ask it for him. Um, so if you were trapped in an elevator, Richelle, for a shorter period of time, not forever, of course, but you had an opportunity to be trapped with anyone, no barrier, space, time continuum, whenever, wherever. Who would you want to be trapped with?
Oh my gosh. That is a very difficult question. Um, I probably can't say my family, can I?
You can, of course, say your family. Who would you want to be trapped with? Anyone, anyone. You wouldn't be the first, but family's certainly a viable option.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose family first. There's a woman's name that comes to mind, but that's just because I really believe that there's potentially answers in hormones. But Roberta Brinton, who is a researcher in Alzheimer's, who
Mm.
has done some research on Parkinson's, and yeah, maybe her and Lisa Moscone, um, in terms of, I know they're kind of outside of Parkinson's, but I think this is really important in terms of, I think we need to talk more together because I actually think
Mm.
there are answers across both conditions that could unlock more treatments for Parkinson's. So I'd love, they amaze me in terms of their brain power around the women's specific. And yeah, if we could get a tiny bit of what funding they're getting or be involved in their funding, I think that would be amazing. Yeah.
Excellent. I
Anyway,
love that.
so I know it wasn't anyone sort of like, there's probably loads of non-Parkinson's people.
No, I love it. Everyone's answers are true and real, and I love them all. This has been really great. Obviously we've known each other now for a while, so obviously it's very fun for me to interview you. But how crazy the journey that you've been on. And it's been an honor for me to watch you go do this journey and inspire us. I mean, with everything that you've been doing in the Parkinson space, I feel lucky that we have you, but I'm sorry that we have you because of Parkinson's. I really wish we
Yeah.
didn't. But
I know, but look, hopefully there'll be other people. I suppose what I'd say to people is there's skill sets and things that they have in their life before Parkinson's they can still bring to the table. So,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. I love that. That is so true. And we have to cultivate that and encourage people to do that. So I'll be curious to see what comes out of the next Congress, both from you and the people who you interact with. But in
yeah.
the meantime, I just want to thank you for joining our podcast, our Here Parkinson podcast. And
See you in Arizona.
yeah, see you in Arizona. Amazing.
Thank you for joining the Here Parkinson's podcast. If you would like to experience the next World Parkinson Congress for yourself, to feel and see the change in real time, save the date to join us from May 24th to the 27th, 2026 in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more at WPC2026.org. This podcast series is made possible with support from Blue Rock Therapeutics.